They told you freedom would come at 65, that if you worked hard, stayed loyal, and kept climbing the ladder for 4 decades, one day you'd be free. Free to travel, to relax, to finally live. Retirement was painted as the promised land, the reward at the end of a long, obedient life. But what if that promise was never real? What if it was a carefully crafted illusion to keep you moving, producing, complying, without ever questioning the cost? For most of your life, the script has been clear. Study hard, get a job, work for 40 years, retire. That's the plan, that's the path. And most people follow it without ever asking who wrote it in the first place. But the truth waiting at the end of that path is far from liberating. According to a 2020 study by the Stanford Center on Longevity, over 2/3 of retirees in America feel disoriented within just 18 months of retiring, and not because they ran out of money, but because they ran out of identity. They suddenly wake up in a world where their role, their purpose, their very sense of self has vanished. You see, the system didn't prepare them for freedom. It prepared them to function. It trained them to operate within a machine, not to live beyond it. Retirement isn't the grand reward they were promised. It's the quiet dismissal from the stage. The moment the role ends, the spotlight fades and no one tells you what to do next. And that's where the existential crisis begins. Because what do you do when you've spent your entire life performing a role, and then that role disappears? Who are you without your job title, without the emails, the deadlines, the meetings that made you feel important? For decades, your value was measured by productivity, not presence. And now that the system no longer needs you, you're expected to know how to simply enjoy life, without ever having been taught how. Retirement was never about freedom. It was about timing your usefulness. It was never designed for you to explore your inner self or to reconnect with what truly matters. It was designed to phase you out, a graceful exit from the machine, while convincing you it's a reward. That's the brilliance of the lie. It doesn't sound cruel, it sounds like a gift. But Alan Watts said it best. You are under no obligation to be the person you were told to be. That sentence shatters the foundation of the retirement myth. Because if you were never meant to follow someone else's script in the first place, then maybe retirement isn't the end of a chapter. Maybe it's the moment you realize the book was never yours to begin with. And that realization hurts, because it forces you to confront a deeper question. What does it mean to be free? If you've spent your whole life waiting for permission to live, are you truly living at all? We are taught to delay everything: joy, rest, discovery, reflection, as if life will finally begin when the work is over. But life doesn't wait. It doesn't start at 65. It has been happening all along, and most of us were too busy preparing for it to notice. So maybe the real lie isn't just about retirement. Maybe the lie is that you ever needed to wait for freedom at all. Maybe freedom was never a destination, it was a way of being, one you could have chosen at any point. But no one told you that, because a free person can't be controlled. A free person doesn't need the script. A free person sees retirement not as a reward, but as a reminder that we traded our days for a promise that was never real. And now we're left wondering what life could have been if we had just started living it sooner. If freedom was never the real goal, then what was? To understand that, we need to step back and look at the structure, the machine that shaped your life before you even knew it. Because what most of us call normal isn't natural at all. It's a system, one built not to empower individuals, but to standardize them. Starting in the 20th century, human life was quietly industrialized. Not just labor, life itself. It was broken down into predictable stages: education, employment, retirement, death. From the moment you're born, the path is already mapped. Go to school, get good grades, learn how to sit still and follow instructions. Then pick a career, Clock in, clock out, repeat for 40 years. Then, if you're lucky, you get a few quiet years at the end before your time runs out. But here's what they never told you. Retirement wasn't created for your benefit. It was created to manage productivity. The concept dates back to 1889 when German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck introduced it, not as a gift to workers, but as a way to remove the elderly from the workforce and make room for younger, more efficient labor. Retirement was economic policy disguised as compassion, and over time, we accepted it as truth. The system never asked what kind of life you wanted. It asked what kind of worker you could become. And slowly, silently, it began to define your worth by how well you could serve its needs. You weren't encouraged to ask why you worked, only how hard. You weren't taught to question the routine, only to improve your efficiency within it. A 2007 publication from the American Psychological Association, The Retiring Mind, put it bluntly. Modern humans have never designed their own lives. They simply follow plans laid out by others. And when you really think about it, isn't that what most of us do? We inherit a template, we follow the model. We spend our most vital years working, often more than 47 hours a week, and never stop to ask, what am I working for? Who is this actually serving? This is the deeper deception, that your life belongs to you when in truth it's been scheduled, scripted, and monetized from the start. The education system trains you for labor. The labor system demands your time, and the retirement system quietly dismisses you when your utility begins to decline. The entire structure is designed for maximum output, not personal fulfillment, and yet most people never resist it. Not because they agree, but because they've never seen another option. When a machine is all you've ever known, silence starts to feel like peace. But it's not peace, it's numbness. You're not free, you're just no longer questioning. The tragedy is that many people don't even realize they're inside a machine until it's too late. Until the noise stops and they're left sitting in the quiet, wondering where all the time went. Because when your life is built around schedules, deadlines, productivity metrics, and future goals, you lose touch with the present moment, with your own inner compass, with what it means to live a life you've actually chosen. You weren't born to be a gear in a machine. You were born to experience life, to feel deeply, to create, to connect, to explore. But a system that runs on control has no room for that kind of freedom. So it sells you a version of life that feels safe, structured, respectable, and quietly drains your spirit in the process. And that's the real question modern society never wants you to ask. What if the life I've been living isn't really mine at all? Once you begin to see the machine for what it is, another truth becomes painfully clear. The system didn't just take your time, it shaped your identity. It taught you to see yourself not as a being, but as a function. You were a teacher, a manager, a doctor, an engineer, and for most of your life, that role defined who you were, until one day it ends, and so does the sense of self. This is the part no one prepares you for. When the meetings stop, the titles disappear, and the calendar goes blank. On the surface, you should feel free, but instead, many feel lost. Not because they miss the work, but because they lose themselves. They no longer know who they are without the role. The identity they spent decades building is suddenly gone. According to the National Institute on Aging, depression rates increase by over 40% during the first year of retirement. And it's not because people lack money, comfort, or time. It's because they're forced to answer a question they've never asked. If I'm no longer working, who am I? This is the crisis that hides beneath the surface, the one no financial advisor can prepare you for. It's not about income, it's about identity. And when that identity was built on function, its collapse feels like a quiet death. A death that happens while you're still breathing, while you're still here but not sure who's left inside. There's a post on Reddit from a man named John, 64 years old, recently retired from Boeing after a life as an engineer. He wrote, "I realized I never actually lived. I just worked. And now that the work is over, I have no idea what to do." His words are raw, honest, and painfully common, because John's story is not unique. It's a mirror of countless lives. Lives where identity and profession became one until there was no separation left between the man and the job. For years, we're told to strive, to climb, to produce, but no one teaches us how to simply exist. So when the striving ends, the silence is deafening. And in it, you feel the weight of everything you once postponed, the curiosity you never followed, the passions you buried, the parts of you that didn't fit the role, so they were left behind. And that's the illusion, the idea that your value lies in being useful, that worth equals function. But as Alan Watts once said, you are not a role. You are the playing of life itself. You were never meant to be just one thing. Life was never meant to be a single job title carried to the grave. But it takes a courage to face the void that opens when the role ends, because that void isn't empty. It's full of questions, the kind you were too busy to ask when the calendar ruled your life. What do I love? What moves me? What do I believe in beyond what I was told to believe? These are the questions that mark the beginning of real freedom, but they require the death of the old identity, the dismantling of the mask, the shedding of the function, the birth of a self that was hidden beneath the role. And maybe that's why the system never wanted you to stop, because in silence, you remember who you were before the mask. And that memory, that spark, is the beginning of something the machine cannot control. A self that is free, not because it retired from work, but because it awakened to life. But even after the role ends, the machine doesn't let you go. It just gives you a new one. This time, not as a worker, but as a consumer. You don't retire from the system. You retire into another system, one designed to profit off the years you have left. The moment you step out of your career, you step into the crosshairs of a trillion-dollar industry, the business of retirement freedom. It's a seductive illusion, one that sells you peace, leisure, fulfillment, all neatly packaged in cruise brochures, real estate pitches, financial plans, and insurance portfolios. You're told this is your time to enjoy life, to travel the world, to finally live. But here's the trick. It's not freedom they're offering, it's a product. And the product isn't the trip, the condo, or the lifestyle. The product is you. Or more precisely, your desire to feel in control after decades of being controlled. They sell you comfort because they know you're afraid of chaos. They sell you plans because they know you've never lived without one. So instead of encouraging inner freedom, they offer external order, a new routine of spending, managing, maintaining, a continuation of structure disguised as liberation. And just like that, retirement becomes a market, not a milestone, a demographic, not a discovery. You're not free. You're just being softly reabsorbed into a more mature corner of the same machine. And the most convincing part of the lie? It feels reasonable, practical, even responsible. You're told to meet with financial advisors to plan your portfolio to maximize your retirement years. But few stop to ask, who benefits from these plans? Who profits from your compliance? The uncomfortable truth is that most financial advice isn't neutral. It's an industry, and industries have motives. The same institutions urging you to chase retirement security are the ones collecting fees, commissions, and interest from the very plans they recommend. Your freedom has a price tag, and they're the ones cashing in. We're led to believe that safety equals freedom, that the more protected, insured, and prepared we are, the freer we'll feel. But Alan Watts exposed the trap. The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing. To hold your breath is to lose your breath. The more you chase stability, the more fragile you become. Because true freedom isn't a carefully managed retirement account. It isn't a beachfront condo or a senior discount on a Mediterranean cruise. It isn't comfort wrapped in fear. It's the ability to see through the illusion, to recognize that most of what you've been sold as freedom is just another layer of control. That doesn't mean there's no value in rest, in travel, or in financial planning. It means those things are only meaningful when they come from intention, not indoctrination. If your retirement is just another script, another checklist of things you're supposed to do, then you haven't escaped the system at all. You've simply changed costumes. The real tragedy isn't that people want to enjoy life after working. It's that they were never shown how to enjoy it while they were working. They were trained to delay, to defer, to survive. And when the moment finally arrives to live, they're still following someone else's plan. Because freedom isn't found in what you can buy after 65. It's found in the courage to ask, what if I stopped buying into the lie altogether? But maybe the biggest lie wasn't just the promise of retirement. Maybe it was what came long before that, the training. Because from the moment you were old enough to understand the world, you were taught to wait, to postpone joy, to delay life. First, it was, when I graduate, then when I get the job, then when I get promoted, when I pay off the house, when I retire, then you'll be happy, then you'll feel free, then you'll really start living. But then never comes, because you've been conditioned to chase it, like a mirage on the horizon that disappears every time you think you're close. Your brain has been trained not to experience the present, but to project constantly into a future that doesn't exist. This isn't just metaphor. Behavioral psychology has a name for it: delay discounting, the tendency to undervalue present experiences in favor of imagined rewards later. The more you delay gratification, the more you train your mind to believe that now is never enough, that life is always somewhere else. And so you live your days in a kind of suspended animation, checking boxes, meeting deadlines, saving for later. You become an expert in survival, not presence. You know how to budget, schedule, optimize, but not how to be still, to feel deeply, to listen to the quiet voice inside. By the time you reach retirement, you don't know how to live. You only know how to wait. And the tragedy is, you think that's normal, but it's not life you've been preparing for. It's death in slow motion. A life postponed becomes a life unlived. You've been so busy measuring your value by how productive, how successful, how secure you are, that you've forgotten how to exist. And when the structure falls away, when the job ends and the roles dissolve, what's left is the terrifying realization you never really arrived. You were always on your way to something else. Alan Watts saw this trap decades ago. He warned us, stop measuring your life, live it. But that message is hard to hear in a society that rewards planning and punishes presence. We're told that productivity is virtue, that hustle is meaning, that slowing down is weakness. So we internalize the belief that rest must be earned, that joy is a luxury, that aliveness is conditional. And before we know it, our entire existence becomes a rehearsal, a long, anxious preparation for a performance that never begins. But here's the truth. There is no grand finale, no perfect moment, no final destination where everything makes sense and nothing hurts. Life is happening right now, in the chaos, in the quiet, in the uncertainty, in the breath you just took. And if you can't touch it now, you won't touch it later, because later is just another word for never when you've been taught to delay everything. The system doesn't just steal your time, it steals your presence. It convinces you that living is something you do after you've earned it. But you don't have to earn your own existence. You never did. You don't need permission to feel joy. You don't need a reason to be fully alive. So the question is no longer, when will you start living? The real question is, Will you ever stop waiting? So, what do we do with all this? After stripping away the myths, the roles, the scripts, what's left? Just this: a choice. Because real freedom isn't something you wait for. It isn't something handed to you after decades of loyalty to a system. And it sure as hell isn't something you buy with a pension plan. Real freedom is a capacity, not a condition. It's not about having more time. It's about having the power to be fully alive in the time you already have. Freedom is presence. It's the ability to meet life as it is, not as you wish it would be, or as you planned it, or as they told you it should look. And the wildest part? You don't have to retire to find it. You can start now, inside the very system that tried to take it from you. You can retire from the mentality before you ever retire from the job. That begins with redefining who you are, not by what you do, not by the role you play, but by what you value. What lights you up? What feels real when everything else falls quiet? Maybe you've spent decades being an engineer, a manager, a provider, but beneath that, you've always been something deeper, a creator, a seeker, a soul. So build your life from that center. Create a new schedule, one that honors more than just deadlines and obligations. Make time for purposeful silence, time where nothing needs to be achieved, solved, or improved. Time to just be. That space is where freedom begins. Not in doing more, but in doing less with more intention. And when it comes to connection, shift the focus. Don't chase experiences for the sake of checking boxes or collecting memories like souvenirs. Choose depth over novelty. Choose people who see you, not just roles you can play. Choose conversations that move you, not just moments that distract you. Because what we're really starving for, beneath all the plans and purchases, is presence with each other. That's where meaning lives. Alan Watts once said, "This is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with the now." That's not just philosophy, it's a survival skill. In a world that's constantly pulling you toward later, toward someday, toward what's next, your ability to return to now is an act of rebellion. And maybe that's the most powerful retirement of all. Retiring from the trance, from the endless striving, from the belief that life is always just a few steps away. You don't need to wait until 65. You don't need the perfect plan. You don't need to have it all figured out. What you need is the courage to stop, to breathe, to ask yourself, what would it mean to actually live today? Not to prepare for life, not to plan for life, but to live it fully, honestly, without the mask, without the timeline. Because the lie was never just about retirement. The real lie was that you ever had to earn your freedom. And the truth? You were free the moment you stopped waiting.